Hello, 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 dear listeners, and welcome to Sound of History. I have found something incredibly interesting that I will share with you in this episode. I was not aware of these facts myself, and maybe there is someone else out there listening that will also learn something new today. When we think about Europe, like Northern Europe, like Scandinavia, or Eastern Europe, like Russia in the 1800s, and we think about the typical inhabitants of these countries, do we ever picture any black people? There surely wasn't any black people living and working in Europe in the 1800s, right? At the time, like mid 1800s, African Americans had only recently been freed from the horrors of slavery across the Atlantic. And meanwhile, in Europe, many people's only exposure to black individuals came through deeply dehumanizing displays. Let's remind ourselves just how different things were at this point in history. We're talking about a time before the airplane was invented, before the car was invented, and a time where Western countries still had colonies all over the world, especially in Africa, where European countries like France, the UK, and Belgium had colonies. And what white Europeans would do is that they would bring Africans from colonies and then exhibit them in so-called human zoos or ethnographic shows, where these poor people were treated more like curiosities than actual human beings. So for many people in Europe, this was their only experience of seeing a black person. So what if I told you that there were black people already living and working as artists in Europe in the 1800s? I don't think this is something that most Europeans are aware of. I definitely wasn't, and I just find this to be so incredibly interesting and something that is definitely worth exploring more and to talk about. And especially as a Swede myself, we actually had black artists living and performing in Scandinavia in the end of the 1800s. The first known African American women to move to and live and work in Scandinavia were Katie Stewart and Alice Ruffin. They arrived in 1874. Katie Stewart and her young daughter, or possibly niece, Alice Ruffin, they left the American South, most likely Alabama, and arrived in Malmö, Sweden by boat. And why they made this journey is unclear. They may have chosen to travel to Europe by themselves in search of opportunity, or they may have been deceived or coerced into making the voyage. We do not know. But what is known is that when they arrived, they had no connections, no knowledge of the local language or culture, and very little control over what came next. And almost right away, as they had arrived to Sweden, a Danish manager with the name O. Sørensen began putting them on display at public markets, standing right next to parrots, monkeys, other animals, strange machines or mechanical contraptions. An absolutely disgusting, appalling, and dehumanizing act. But sadly, this was not an unusual way to treat black people at the time. And then, for nearly 2 decades, Stewart and Ruffin toured across Denmark, Sweden, and all the other Nordic countries as performers. And they went by many names: Ketty, Zitte, Jansson, Johnson. Alice became known as Ruffen, Rosen, and eventually as Topsy. And their real names and birthplaces, and even their real relationship to each other, still remains uncertain. And their early performances were managed by promoters who frequently changed their identities to suit the audience's curiosities. So at first, ads leaned into sensationalism. Katie was described as a former slave, and they put emphasis on the duo's physical features, their skin color, their hair texture, and their supposed exotic behaviors, which, in many ways dehumanized them. And rumors were even spread that they had been kidnapped and smuggled across the Atlantic to add like a more dramatic flair to the marketing of the duo. And as time went on, something started to change, because as they began to learn to speak Swedish and Danish, Stewart and Ruffen gained some agency and control over how they were presented to the audiences. And eventually, ads began to highlight their talents as singers and dancers, their elegant clothing, and their stage presence. And they managed to move away from being just curiosities to being recognized as entertainers. And humor became a part of their act, and audiences were invited to laugh with them rather than at them. They also played with their supposed origins, and sometimes they were claiming that they had ties to South America, South Africa, or Alabama. And these changing backstories were most likely a mix of performance strategy and a necessity, whatever they could think of to help sell tickets. Katie Stewart and Alice Ruffen eventually settled in Sweden, which they made their home. And in 1893, Katie passed away, and Alice followed soon after, and she passed away in 1897. And despite the huge mystery surrounding these two women and their true identities, based on the little things we know about them, how impressive isn't it, the story of their resilience and fearlessness that took them across the Atlantic to Scandinavia, where they were able to find a place for themselves in a world that was very different from the one that we live in today. And I just find it absolutely incredible. In this episode, I would like to shine some light on two Black female performers who left the US to come to Europe during the turn of the last century. I was not aware of the existence of these women, nor their life stories or work. And I think a lot of other people might not be as well. So I want to bring these forgotten, brave, groundbreaking women into the spotlight, at least in this little podcast of mine, and give them the recognition that they deserve.
So Kentucky home. Good night. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song of my old Kentucky home, of my old Kentucky home, far away.
What a voice! That was Arabella Fields singing My Old Kentucky Home. The information I have been able to find about Arabella Fields is that she was born as Sarah Arabella Middleton in Philadelphia in 1879. It is said that she started performing at only 8 years old, and by age 15 she joined a vaudeville troupe that was heading for Europe. And the name of the group was the San Francisco Minstrels, and they made their debut in Berlin in 1894. They then toured through Scandinavia, Russia, and Eastern Europe, and somewhere along the Siberian leg of the journey, she married fellow performer James C. Fields. And after they got married, they began touring together as a duo, and they were calling themselves James and Bella. By the early 1900s, Arabella had left James and she was performing solo and had fully embraced Europe as her stage. And Arabella wasn't just a talented singer and performer, she was also a master of reinventing herself. With her dark brown skin and striking stage presence, she changed her identities throughout her career, and she was presenting herself at different times as African, Indian, Native American, South American, and even Australian. And she did this to fit into the narrative of the show or to draw curiosity from audiences, whatever she could do to make people come and see her perform. She then became a sensation in Germany, and she was performing arias, traditional lieder, and even yodeling. And she was wearing like traditional Tyrolean clothing. She then married a German producer and pianist with the name Engelhard Winter, and according to some sources, Winter was deeply in love with Arabella, and they had a child together. But it is said that Fields treated the marriage as one of convenience to just further her career. And she then continued to tour and perform across Germany, Holland, Austria, and beyond. She wowed crowds by singing in fluent German, English, Russian, French, and Dutch. And in 1907, she made some of the earliest known recordings by an African-American artist in Europe, and she even appeared in 3 silent films, sadly now lost. And between 1908 to 1913, she was touring non-stop, just traveling all over the place. She was performing in Italy, Romania, Switzerland, and even in Turkey. And she remained a popular figure throughout World War I, and she was, during the war, living in Amsterdam together with her family. And she was performing in theaters across Holland and Germany. And after the war had ended, Arabella moved back with her husband and possibly their child or children to Germany. And by 1921, her marriage, which was not great, had become even worse, so the couple separated. And living in Germany after World War I was not easy. The growing tension and numerous street revolts and inflation made it difficult for Arabella to support herself and work as a performer. So she decided to leave for a 2 to 3 year long Eastern European tour, and she toured across Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia until 1924.
At night I sit alone and dream of days when you were always near, and memory then recalls the time when both our lives were happy, dear. I knew where you could be. I trust your heart is still the same. When nature sleeps and all is dear, I whisper fondly one sweet name, because I love you. Because I love you, my only one regret, since we've never met. Because I love you, because I love you. Yes, my heart is yours, because I love you. Because I love you. Because I love you. My only one regret, since we've never met. Because I love you. Because I love you. Yes, my heart is yours, because I love you.
By the mid 1920s, Arabella became a part of a major touring revue that helped to introduce jazz and the Charleston to audiences across Europe. So she was again touring and performing, and she then performed in a series of high-profile shows that took her beyond Europe. She went to places like Egypt and Syria to perform. She retired from singing in 1931, but she made a film appearance in 1933 in a movie that was shot in both North Africa and at the French Riviera. And around the same time as the movie premiered, she passed away in Hamburg, Germany, at the age of 54. Leaving behind a trailblazing legacy as one of the first African-American women to become a star in Europe. What a life she lived, Truly incredible, and she deserves far more recognition and should not be forgotten in history.
I set midst my throne within a palace grand, in a city far beyond the sea, in a distant foreign land. I listened the grand strain. My ear had ever heard, enraptured, charmed, amazed I was. My inmost soul was stirred. I looked on the singular fair. My heart was at her feet. She sang a song, the old theme, in accent low and sweet. The memories of that night of bliss shall never from me part. She sang a song of home, sweet home, the song that reached my heart. Home, home, sweet, sweet home. She sang a song of home, sweet home, the song that reached my heart.
If you enjoy listening to this podcast, if it brings you entertainment or pleasure listening to these old songs and the stories about artists that lived 100 years ago, please help me out by liking, sharing, rating, subscribing, commenting on this podcast to help me reach more listeners. Thank you so much for your help. Now back to the episode. Now I'm moving on to the second star of this episode, Belle Davis. She was an American singer, dancer, and choreographer, and she rose to fame in Britain in the early 1900s, before World War I, and she was known for her powerful stage presence and smooth soprano voice.
A black man in the minstrel show was sitting on the end. A nice black gal in the very front row with a heap of dough to spend looked up at him with a silly smile. He started singing his end song, forgot most every line. The manager hurried back and said, "You got to stand to find." He lost his jaw for quite a while, just because she made them goo-goo eyes. Thought he'd run her home and talk to pride. Is the best what is, and I need her in my bills, or just because she made them goo-goo eyes. next day when the troop had left, this baby slowed him down. Said, look at here, man, I'll have you peace if you don't leave this town. Oh, listen to his halo roll. Said, I guess I'll have to telegraph, try and join the show. What I do in this strange land, honey, huh? Can't eat without no dough, so here I am, left all alone. Just because you make that boo-boo, I don't know. Oh, you wanna home and pop the fry. It's the best what is, and I need her in my bed. Or just because you make them boo-boo,
That was Belle Davis singing Just Because She Made Them Goo Goo Eyes. She was most likely born in New Orleans, although some sources say Chicago. She launched her career in 1891 when she was a part of a burlesque show, the Creole Show, in Chicago. And by the early 1900s, she was touring in Europe and capturing audiences with her voice and charisma. And in 1901 or 1902, she decided that she was going to leave the US and move to the UK. And she brought with her a group of talented young African American boys, some were as young as 10 years old, and they added comedy and dance to her musical acts. But far from exploiting these children, as some performers of the era were known to do, Davis was remembered as a protective guardian of the boys, and many of them that she worked with then went on to have successful careers of their own. In 1902, Belle Davis recorded the song with the title The Honeysuckle and the Bee, and a month later she was back again in the studio to record another song. And these early recordings are believed to be the first time a black woman was ever captured on record, which is a huge moment in music history.
Miss Belle Davis and her pickaninny sing The Honeysuckle and the Bee. With one she loves the best, as they told their tales of love from the arbor just above came a bee which lit upon the bough as it sipped the honeydew. They both vowed that they'd be true.
Her light skin complexion didn't fit the audience's stereotyped image of a black performer, so she was often told to darken her skin, to exaggerate her blackness, to make herself into a caricature. In both the US and Europe, audiences wanted an exaggerated portrayal of blackness. And Belle Davis was quite clever about this. She moved through this tricky world with a keen sense of the game. She was mocking white performers who were already mocking black stereotypes. Her performances included the exaggerated gestures and dialects that were expected by white audiences, but she infused them with sharp irony and self-awareness. And her act wasn't just entertainment, it was critique. And through this bold approach, she managed to challenge harmful stereotypes while still captivating audiences. By 1929, Belle Davis had shifted her focus to choreography, and she had taken on a leadership role for a dance group at the famous Casino de Paris music hall in Paris. She recruited dancers and formed a group called the Magnolia Blossoms, and they performed in Paris until 1929. And that year marks the last confirmed record of Davis in Europe. And after decades of touring and breaking ground across Europe, Belle Davis returned home to the United States in 1938. And after that, all traces of her disappear, and what became of her afterward remains a mystery. I would like to give credit to the Ambientscape project. They have a website, ambientscape.com, where I was able to find these recordings of Arabella Fields and Belle Davis. They have an impressive, to say the least, compilation of black artists who were living in Europe and making music between the late 1800s until the 1920s. It's up on their website and available for downloading. And the compilation was originally released on the Bear Family Records label, but has been long out of print and is now available in MP3 format on the website. The songs have been mastered from the original wax cylinders and shellac discs. And there is so many more artists and songs in this compilation to go through, so I have decided to do a couple of episodes about forgotten black artists that were living and recording in Europe around the turn of the last century. So stay tuned. That was all I had to share in this episode, where I wanted to focus on some of the earliest black female artists that were living and working in Europe around the turn of the last century. I will be back soon again, and until next time.